I wanted to basically do two things. We're going to do a quick leadership message, and then we're going to divvy up the fences for more fences questions. But the reason I wanted to do a leadership thing is just because, I think it's a need in our house, this message, because we're growing and we're moving. And growth means that you both need to develop more leaders, but you also have to develop the leader. Yes. So leaders have to keep getting bigger, and we have to keep releasing people more, and we've got to keep pushing people into new spaces. Yeah. So I wanted to read something that, to me, is not completely, connected. So I'm not trying to be a theologian with this verse and tie it to a leadership thought, but I am going to talk to the fact that it speaks to seasons well. And it speaks to the fact that some things will always be there and they're always coming around. And it speaks to today's leadership thought, which is look to the front doors. And it's a value. That's why I say it. Even though I've preached on this before, we keep preaching mantras because it helps us remember them as an org and as a church around the things that we're trying to keep moving towards. So it's Genesis 8:22, and it says this: as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. The truth is just that it's speaking about a cycle that is obviously always going to revisit us. And I think that it applies to leadership in this aspect, that too often in leadership we do it with set and forget. So oh man, I already built my 12, which by the way, 7's not 12. That's right. 6 isn't 12. Only 12 is 12. Build your grow group to 12 because 11 isn't 12. We need 12 in our groups. Side note, another mantra. But the thing is that I think people think leadership is set and forget, right? Man, I've built my 12, I've got 12, or I have my team. And the truth is that couldn't be more of a lie. The reality is that there is both a planting of leaders and a harvest of leaders, and that has to keep happening. That cycle has to continue. And as I look through just in-house, our own church, I feel like where we're kind of needing to just push into new space is that we've got to keep remembering that we've got to keep pushing for new leaders. Yeah. We've got to keep drawing leadership out of people. Why? I think there's lifeblood to leadership. Yeah. Leadership is your ability to take yourself from where you are to the places that God has called you. Yeah. If people aren't moving, they're getting stagnant. Stagnant things die, and things die around stagnant things. Yeah. A stagnant body of water does not host life, but a flowing body of water always hosts life. If we are not drawing more out of the people that we have and not pushing them down the road further, all that's going to happen is eventually the place you left them last is the place they'll die. And I think we do see that in a lot of people. We see leadership death in that people were once on fire and they're not on fire. Yeah. They were once activated and they're no longer activated. They were once moving towards their giftings. They're no longer moving towards them. They were once moving in their giftings and they're no longer moving. Yeah. And it's simply because what we do is this set and forget. I've already told you what to do, do it. Or I've already invested into you, you're invested into. Mm-hmm. When the truth is that there has to be a continual pushing of the line and pushing them down the road and seeing what's next. Not only that, but we need to have a culture that looks to the front door. Yeah. Because at the moment, I would say we tend to be a bit more harvest oriented than we are seed. And it's not one or the other. So that means that we celebrate the leaders we have, but we're not looking for the leaders we don't have.
Wow.
Are we still looking through foyers going, man, there's a preacher in you?
Yes.
Are we looking through foyers going, there's a company in you?
Yeah.
There is a grow group leader in you. There is a team leader in you. There is more in you. The thing with that is that often we don't do that because we don't want the collateral and we don't want the work that is involved in building a leader. Because it's difficult. Yeah. There's going to be mistakes. Things are going to fall. Yeah. The thing, though, with that is that you are happy to hold the line, but you're also holding up the line. Yeah. If you're holding the line of excellence for too long, eventually you're no longer holding the line of excellence, you're holding up the line of growth. Wow. Yeah. So what that means is that quite often we think, man, nothing in my department has ever failed. Nothing on my team has ever fallen short. I'm holding the line of excellence. Oh, you're stepping on him more. You're stepping on his ear. Dang. And he still kisses you. That was so bad. Look at him, he's like... It was so slow motion. It just wouldn't stop. No, it would not stop. Okay, sorry for that traumatic event. I promise you, we're very safe with this puppy. You can trust us. Please don't report us. So I've found that a lot of leaders are so caught up in holding the line of excellence and holding the line of reputation and holding the line of no line breaks that they are actually holding up the line of development. If we don't start pushing people and releasing people, we're actually standing in the way. Quite often, the job you're doing is someone else's, and you're standing in the way of them fulfilling their calling, them fulfilling their next step towards growth. And if there is no avenue for growth, there's only going to be death. So if you don't have space, what kind of space are you making for leaders to flourish under your leadership? Like, even as a grow group leader, are you the one that's always praying? Or are you giving that portion of prayer over to someone so that they can step up and grow into that? It's maybe not big, but as you do that, they're stepping up in faith. That is a milestone for them. They're walking out like, man, I prayed in group today. And someone said it hit them. That's awesome. But if you keep holding the line of excellence because you can't let the quality of prayer drop, then you'll never have the quality of leaders rise. If leaders are ever going to be good, they've got to have space to be bad. If they're going to get it right, they've got to have space to get it wrong. If they're going to learn our culture, they've got to get an understanding of it through the exercise of doing leadership. So I kind of want to challenge us here today. If we're going to be believing for these revival nights, well, the truth is that's awesome, and people are going to be encountering God, and they're going to be transforming, but then they're going to need to be sent. And if they're going to be sent, they need to be equipped. And they need to be empowered, and then they need to be released. You can empower someone and not release them at the very same time. I empower you to lead this, but I will not release you to do it because I'll still hold the reins. How are you creating environments for leaders to keep flourishing? How do we simply do that? We at People Church has often spoken about the way that Jesus built his disciples, and I just want to refresh it for the fact that he did 4 simple steps, and I want to refresh that with us and then give you a few little keys, and then we'll jump into some questions around fences. But number 1 is what we see Jesus do is that he saw potential. He basically saw potential above anything. He never said somebody's no for them. He knew the no of the rich young ruler, but he didn't say no for him. He called the fishermen that were in family businesses, and yet he saw potential. In an uneducated person, he saw the potential to lead a movement. And even though they had a family business, he still called them. Often we don't call and ask more of leaders because we make their decision for them. Surely you're too busy. Surely you wouldn't want to step to this. I don't know if you could. Honestly, I think you'd be surprised at what people do when you ask them to step to more. There's always more in them. And here's the other thing. Don't stop asking till you find where their current cap rate is. Know where they're finished for right now. That's the only way that growth is going to happen. If you are not at the end of somebody's capacity, then you can't actually be part of increasing it. Because it's already, they're just studying, they're just where they're at. You've got to keep asking people to keep stepping. As you do that, here's what happens. Anyone that's ever led something knows you're going to lean on God more. Because leadership in church is a God construct. You're trying to take people and move them towards spiritual growth, which guess what? They're going to learn how to pray at another level. They're going to feel like the spiritual weight at another level. There's great things that happen from this. So number 1, you've got to be able to see the potential in someone and never say they're no for them. Number 2 is you need to call people, but you need to call them with vision. Always call someone to more, but call them with vision. Don't call them to a task. A task is not vision. Call them with vision. A vision is what the task will change in the world around them. A vision is why we do this. A vision is how we do this. Don't call them just a task, call them with vision. When you call them with vision, things start to shift. How many times have we probably called people to task and then we wonder why we've got high turnover rates in our serve teams? I'll tell you how you know that you've called someone a task instead of vision. They say things like, I'm just on production. I'm just on, car park. They basically adjust is saying that it's not part of a really meaningful big picture perspective. They have to understand that, I got a Slack today about this girl that she said that basically she was ready to give up on God and church, a frustrating month, but the moment she entered the car park, the Holy Spirit met her there, and that the car park hosts actually started talking to her, ministering and helping her from the get-go. So for anyone that thinks that car park is just parking a car, it's not. It's facilitating the first point of somebody's encounter with Jesus. So when you actually have vision, you never call someone to a position. And when you have vision, vision outlasts seasons. So there you get people that don't feel lost when they've done their task. You see people that are starting to say, what's next? Because I know where you're taking me to. People will give their life for a vision, but they won't give their life for a task. We got to keep making sure that we call people with vision. Vision is sometimes slightly ahead of where they are, sometimes drastically ahead of where they are, but nonetheless, you've got to be able to see for people what they can't see for themselves. That's the other thing. I've never found that rarely have I called a leader to something that they see for themselves. It's typically you calling them as something they can't see exactly, but they're willing to step to. Third thing is that you need to walk and challenge. You need to walk with and challenge them. You need to challenge the mindset. You need to challenge the status quo. You need to challenge the lifestyle things that are no longer in alignment with where they're going. Live a life worthy of your calling. Basically, is the life you're living in direct relation to the place you're going? Because for every destination, there's got to be habits that you have to pick up and habits that you got to drop. Part of discipleship is helping people understand the habits they got to pick up and the habits they got to drop. Hey, I know you're going towards this. I'm not questioning your commitment. You've been walking. But let me just tell you this, that this right here is not going to hold you and sustain you over there. So let's work on this now. Let's talk about your prayer life. Let's talk about the fact that you shy away from your authority. I asked you to lead group and you just abdicated it to everybody else. Why? Well, I don't feel comfortable. We're going to have to get this. Because if you keep abdicating what God is putting on you, eventually it'll bypass you. Like you've got to choose to walk in the shoes that he's calling you to. So we've got to keep actually learning and teaching and challenging. Challenging is as small as like, hey, you're always late. Well, I know, but it's been good. Yeah, but you're not late to other things. And let me tell you what late says. Late says more about the way you see you than I see you. How so? Late tells me that you don't have anything that you need to contribute on the front foot, that you are just somebody that is counted as an attendee, but you're not coming in here to move a room. When you're coming to move a room, you come with intent. When you come with intent, you come early. So it tells me more about how you see you on a Sunday. When you come late, it's because you don't think you make a difference. I don't come late to things that I know I've got to affect. Gio doesn't come late to things that he knows he's got to contribute to. Neither does Sarah. No leader comes late to an environment that they are responsible for setting. So at the end of the day, these are the small nuances of walk and challenge. Some of the walk and challenges are like, hey, I'm going to quit today and I'm going to come serve in church. That's awesome. But guess what? I don't need to be standing with you in 4 months from now when you can't pay your rent and now you can't serve in church and you're blaming God. How about we pray about this and why don't we actually put a plan to what it looks like to be doing this? Because right now, I love that you want to be on staff, but for you in particular, you might not be there yet. So how do we walk that out? If at the end of the day, they've got their God conviction, albeit a practical example on that is Sarah. She's had a God conviction on that and she's walked towards it. But our responsibility is we want to test and kick the tires and go, is this a conviction or is this laziness? Because quite often people would rather abandon their post for their passion. You know, like, I got to do this and I don't want to do this, but I'm passionate and it's a Christ thing, so like, let's just do it. But now they're broke. And now we've got to pastor them through brokenness. And you know what I mean? And like, it's a thing. It's a real thing. So challenging is everything, you know? It's every facet of life. It's like, hey, you know, it's all the different things. So you got to walk and challenge. All of these are just refreshers. And the main one was really you have to equip, empower, and release. This is where I think we're majorly stuck, guys. Like, I think as a church right now, everyone on this call, I need you to think. Some of you might go, man, step 1 is where I'm at. Step 2 is where I'm at. 3, 4. I want you to think about this too with your kids. If you've got kids in this room, you could be doing this with your kids. You know that I found that discipline that is simply around don't do, without a reason of why I don't do is going to get me to where I want to be, is never going to work. So it's the seasons that we've given our kids vision that it extends beyond behavior that we've seen our kids actually flourish the most. The minute we speak into their future and their potential is the minute that they start lining up some of the things at home. That's what I think has been quite easy with leading and raising crews. From day one, he has been very oriented on the worship front. He knows that he's a musician. And so talking to him and leading him has been a little bit more easy because he knows what he's running towards. The Bible talks about raise a child in the way that they should go and they will not depart from it. That's not just behavioral. That's saying, no, raise a child in the way that they should go. Know that they were made for a purpose. Give them Jesus, give them love, and give them purpose. And you watch it, they don't depart from it because they actually have found what everybody is looking for, those three things. And so I think the same thing, I think that's crucial. So some of you will be in different seasons and whatever. You can apply this in your business. You can apply this everywhere, But if you're in People Church in particular, as we're seeing all the growth coming in and more people getting saved on Sundays than I think in any season that we've ever had, I want you to keep looking at these front doors. I don't want you to get comfortable with the same table that you have dinner with and have lunch with. I want you to be looking for who's next. Like, we got incredible people like Tiffany Williams. Like, who's speaking into Tiffany Williams and giving her what's next? You know what I mean? Like, who's setting those parameters and talking to people? And you know what? On the walk, on the equip, empower, and release, equipping sometimes looks like taking people on a journey of discovering what they're good at. If I'm going to equip you, I need to actually make sure you're in your grace zone. If you keep watching somebody try to walk in a grace zone that is not theirs, and we don't challenge it, we're creating a loss that is going to hurt them, that is unnecessary. There is something about helping somebody find what they're good at and speaking to that so that they win. As the person being led, you've got to be humble enough to actually go, hey, my pride's set on maybe the wrong stuff here. I just want to be good at something versus being good at what I'm made to do. But equipping sometimes looks like helping people get to what they're good at. Equipping, empowering, and releasing at the moment is where would I aim that? I would aim that at not the leaders we haven't discovered yet, but I would aim it at every single person who's on a team right now, every single person that's in a grow group right now, every single person who's on one of your department heads. All those people, I need you to go back and look at them and go, what have I equipped you for? How have I empowered you? And how am I releasing you? And then you need to ask, there's only two measures to it. The first measure is, I called you with vision. So now I've got to ask if I've equipped you to that vision, I've empowered you to that vision, am I releasing you to that vision? If not, you've got to go back and ask why and bridge that gap, right? The only other one is, I'm asking you if you're equipped, empowered, and released, but I'm actually, there's a vision I haven't communicated, but there's an expectation I'm wanting you to fulfill. Like, I actually want you to be a leader of this, and I've never told you that. And yet, so a small conversation I had with Frank, little Frank, well, he's not little, he's taller than me, Frankie, but he's young, so he's young Frankie. I was like, well, in the foyer, I was just like, hey man, like, I asked him, what are you made for? Because I in my mind, see what he's made for. And we had a conversation, and it was a transaction, and it led to a prayer, and it led to an epiphany, and to a moment. And I think that at the end of the day, there's no harm in calling someone to more, but it's often the catalyst to getting them to realize and live to the more. Because how many people usually wake up in the morning and go, oh yeah, I'm going to be pretty awesome, and I'm going to lead thousands, and people don't. So it's our job to keep setting a vision and then making sure we're equipping them, empowering them, and releasing them to it. So I just want you to really focus on that and think about that. Equipping, I'll just give you one on each thing that can help you as a practical. If you're going to talk about equipping, what's a great way to equip someone? Ask yourself, do you have the tools and the tricks of the trade to do the job? So if we're going to call someone to be a preacher, I've just got to ask, have I taught you how to preach? Do you know how to MC? Have I taught you how to write a message? Have I taught you the balance point between discovering what kind of a writer you are? What kind of a preacher you are? Have I given you the tools that I've used? Have I told you should pick about 4 or 5 preachers that you resonate with, and then see which parts of what they do that you resonate with, and then start trying to emulate that? Have I given you an opportunity to MC, and then have I asked you and given you feedback on that? That's how I equip people. It's very much just the simplicity of, do you know how to do what I'm asking of you? Empowerment, I think it is empowering when you speak life in alignment with their destination. Empower them by telling them that I give you this much scope to move. I believe that you are going to do it well. I believe that this is on your life. I want to empower you. I'm going to direct you. Like, I'm going to direct you. So you see Jesus, like, basically sends them out and he equips and he empowers them. He's like, hey, today I'm going to put what's on my life, my authority. I'm going to give it to you. You're going to go out and then come back and tell me how it went. So empowerment is when you start to give people a portion of your authority and you put your seal on their endeavor and then you send them out. So you start giving them some empowerment to go do something. And then releasing is a little different. I think releasing is when you finally actually really tell them, hey, you've been equipped, you've been empowered. Now I want you to go actually live this. You're there now. Like, you are the next, age group leader within our youth ministry. Hey, I think you're ready to actually run a grow group. I'll finish on this one because I think it's such a small, subtle difference, but we often don't do it, and then we wonder why people aren't going. Quite often you'll look at your grow group and you'll be like, that person's ready, that person's ready, that person's ready, and you say nothing. Releasing is when you let go. So it's like, you're ready, and I'm going to actually let you go to start a grow group. I'm gonna get you to go do that now. You know what I mean? So I'm going to let you go build this age group. Like, you've taught them, but you've actually now got to make a verbal definition and just line in the sand moment that's saying, this is where now I'm going to send you to do it. So you've got to go. So do you have grow group leaders? Do you have people? Do you have leaders in your team? Do you have people that you go, oh man, they could just so take this over from me? What's stopping you from doing that? Let me put a challenge out there to every leader. You are probably really thriving in your leadership when you could actually walk away from it tomorrow and answer some other need in our church. That's when you know you've arrived. You should have someone doing your job before you actually step away from it and walk into something else. So there should be someone, soon Jimmy will have someone that's running all the ministries under him, and they do everything he does, and it should get to a point where people actually realize, I go to that person and I don't go to Jimmy anymore, because that guy really runs everything. At that point, I could say to Jimmy and Leah, hey, we want a campus in Berlin, and I know that's always been in your heart, Germany. Let's go. Or, hey, Jimmy, there's something else. At that point, I can release, because why? He's released. A leader that releases gets released.
Wow, that's good.
So I want to encourage you, look through your team and ask, what are you holding that someone else should be stewarding?
That's great.
And that's just a little bit on our looking to the front doors. I just want to make sure that we don't ever create a bottleneck, and that there's never just an elite of 20% that carry everything. And we're just never building and developing people. There's so much faith when people start on their journey like this. And then to anybody that is just in seasons of leadership and you feel like you're getting it wrong, that's all right. Just commit to doing it till you get it right. There's nothing wrong with getting it wrong. The only deficit is created when you choose not to learn from what you got wrong. So just keep moving. All right. Questions on fences, if there are any. If not, but we just thought we'd open up. Ords wanted to open up. Any questions on anything fences from the town hall, or even on this leadership stuff?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you guys listen to me?
Yeah, we can listen to you.
Okay. So it's more so a personal question. I was wondering, like, how can you explore yourself in ministry? If that makes sense.
Like, how do you find maybe the different gifts that you've got in ministry?
So kind of a little background. So yesterday when Fallon was given the word of like, oh, her worship is like her number one, and then what she did, the diploma that she has, like that comes second. I feel like that really spoke to me. And I'm like, okay, so if I am called to ministry, like how can I explore myself through that? Because I don't see it yet, probably, or
Yes.
I see it, but not like far ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know what I would do is, I think there's a few basics. It is, one, this is how it worked for me. I found out that I was called to lead and preach, and it all started through serving. I made myself available. As I made myself available and I served, it became apparent what my gifts were. And I also think it's imperative that you're part of a good leadership culture that is preaching what we just preached, looking at the front doors. Because if you combine those two things, you've got the fact that here you are at the front door, serving and available, and here is your leader and the leader above them and the leader above them and the leader above them asking the question, who's our next leader that can do? And they're constantly feeding that down the chain. And we've got an environment where while you're trying to search what you're good at, we're searching for what you're good at. Does that make sense? And so as you serve, what you do is what you're good at is always clear. Like you can't help but be good at what you're good at. So the more you serve, you start to do that. And at the same time, the approach of service starts to build faithfulness. And it builds character. Now, what that does is you're killing two birds with one stone. You're serving and you're building your character, which is going to be necessary, but you're also slowly starting to develop and find your gifts. I've watched that in the house of God, the Holy Spirit's hugely involved in this process, and that what he does is he walks through the church and pairs people with people and finds things and gives people words. I was literally setting up a foyer when my pastor walked through and he goes, "Hey, you're Chris, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I think you could do what I do. I think you're made for leadership," and then walked off. And I was like, but it stuck with me. And then because we had that culture, my grow group leader was there and he's like, "I know what that means. That means I better start developing this guy and see what's in there." And so, if Ords and I ever give someone a word of leadership and you know them, you see them, they're not a team member, like you should straight away be like, "Oh, who is this person?" So I think that's how I would do it. And then the next thing is if you have any skill sets that you feel you have, put them on offer. Put them on offer and you'll start to, that's another great way. People will start to see what you're good at through those things. So can you sing? Audition for the worship team. Are you good with creating stuff? Get on a design team. I think that's really important. And I think it's hugely about seed meets environment. So, thank you, Jackie.
Hi, I got an unusual question. Oh, and I'm freezing, but hopefully this works. Is it not freezing?
No, we see you. You're not frozen.
Oh, okay. How do you speak to man, you see something in someone this is a vision for the people that you're leading, and also this might be the need, and maybe the two are not the same. I don't know if that makes sense, but let's say the example is man, I see you preaching, and also we really need somebody doing something that's not preaching right now. That
Yes.
maybe feels very different.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. And again, you got to understand, so we always got to differentiate between, are we building an organization or a church? The body of Christ is absolutely defined by different measures, and some of those measures being that character is huge.
Yes.
And that we understand that as we honor the place that we're at, God honors that and elevates us. I mean, no one would have ever thought that a king would come from a shepherd. You know what I mean? And no one ever thought that one of the best managers of a nation would come from being actually the least work-oriented brother in a family. You know what I mean? But the truth is that what God has set on you is going to take its place, but where he builds you is not the spaces that directly correlate, because what he's not trying to build is your gifting, he's trying to build your character. And, I think that I spend more time building a preacher's character than I ever spend developing their speaking gift. Their speaking gift we can work on. I don't care about that. I want to know who you are off the stage, and that's what I'm putting on the stage. So I think it's understanding that and having confidence in that and doing that. And then I think it's a good verse. I always think it's faithful with little, faithful with much. And I think it's hey, that's awesome that you're called to preach. I see it. That alone says so much, Brianna, because you're really seeing them. You're identifying them. but you're also saying there is purpose in what you're doing now. You know, like you want to be good with a mic, get good with a toilet brush first. You know, get good with this coffee thing. Get good with a broom. Get good with chairs. Because I'll tell you what, you'll find more messages in a parking lot. You'll learn more about preaching in the parking lot than you will like anywhere else. Like Frankie and Sin could be writing messages weekly because they're actually where messages are created when you're serving people. And then we had someone, I saw someone else with a hand raised. Shayla.
Hi guys. Good morning. I have something I just wanted to add really quickly. It's not really a question, but Pastor Chris, you prophesied over me last Sunday, and you were asking me about was there like a transition, like a big crossroad that I was coming up to in my life, and at the time I couldn't think of anything, or like I just couldn't think of anything at that moment. And so 3 days later, I actually got news that I'm a travel nurse, so my current contract got cut. It's getting cut tomorrow. And I've been with this same organization for 2 years. And it was bittersweet because even though they were cutting my contract, they opened a possibility for me to take a leadership position within the organization because I've been there actually longer than the regular staff. The turnover rate is so bad that I'm a traveler and I've been there the longest, and I've trained everybody who comes through. And so now I'm actually applying for this job. They're telling me it's pretty much a shoe-in, and I kind of shied away from it because I've always been intimidated by leadership, even though I have the qualities. So I'm currently in the process of like going for this position, and I just wanted to say that that happened last week, and I am just so happy that we're discussing this, and it's really been beneficial to me, like in this decision.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Miss Hernandez.
Hello. My question is, how do you ride the balance point of seeing where someone can be and calling them without that becoming, I don't know, like a hindrance or like a stumbling block? I feel like there's a line of like saying like, oh, I see this for you too soon. So I imagine like discernment and all those things, but like, I guess how do you do that well?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I personally think there's a difference between I see this on you and I'm not sure about this for you. My hesitance when I speak something is whether I'm sure or not sure. If I see it, it's never too soon. Why? I want them to trip if they're going to trip. If they're going to trip now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, my old pastor used to say, you got to let them buck. Like, when you're leading someone, you got to make the tough calls, and you got to let them either go with it or give you really bad, kickback. Because you don't know where someone's at if you keep cushioning their journey. You actually get to the end, and what happens is the fear you had about they might have an attitude or a stumbling block actually manifests because you cushioned their journey so much because you didn't want to possibly have that you actually never got to address it and see it.
Right.
So it's necessary that we speak things and we see how people respond. You don't speak it because you think it's going to happen tomorrow. You speak it because you're signing a declaration of the work is starting today. I see you as a leader, we're going to start working today. I see you as a preacher, we're going to start working today. As soon as I say I see you as a preacher, we're going to find out whether you want the platform or whether you're going to shy away from it. There's usually those two extremes. And so it's a navigation point of that, really, I think. You got to let them be what they're going to be. Make sure you're there. You can't soften the blows, but you're there to pick them up when they fall and teach them how to do it different. Nicholas James.
Hello. Hey, all. I had a question around leadership, kind of in the equipment power release area. Because what I've noticed over, I don't know, the past couple years, both here and then in my work, is that usually when you're a leader, you're naturally more engaged or in just whatever the thing you're leading, right? I mean, that's just kind of par for the course. So if you're a leader in the church, you're generally more engaged in church than the people you're leading. And something I've been like thinking about is kind of that feedback loop of, okay, vision, direction, this is what we're doing, where we're going to go, communicating that to them. And then there's often a time portion between, what you say, direction, where you're going, and then somebody executing or moving, or even them just digesting that before you ever see that come back. And I'm just curious a bit, like, how you navigated that tension of, like, obviously you see something and you want to head there right away and you want to see people move there right away. And I think for me, it can be easy to smother and to just keep content moving and keep direction going. But there's a trail of like, I need people to catch up. Like,
Yeah.
I need people to like keep. Does that make sense?
Yes. I would say this. I see what you're saying, but the way that I've experienced it is a little different. I would say that engagement is not a byproduct of leadership, it's a byproduct of ownership. And if you want somebody to have ownership, you have to give them a portion of responsibility. And if you want them to have responsibility that is exciting, it's got to be responsibility where they are a stakeholder and there is room for them to spread their wings and legs and run with it, not simply deliver a task back to you. You also have to know, are they a task doer? Are they a leader? Who are they? Because a leader needs some room to roam, and then a task person needs boundaries. A task person gets lost in places to roam. They want to know what they're doing, when they're doing it. Let me go do it and let me do it well. A leader needs to go, actually, I need some space to create and to paint because I want to spread this and I want to know if I can do this. And I value your leadership. I'm under there, but I need that. And everything equals. So one of my old youth pastors used to say that basically responsibility equals ownership. So it's making sure that someone is responsible. The second thing, the outlier to all this is that there is no formulaic approach to guarantee engagement. But something my dad taught me is if you can't change your people, change your people. So if you won't change, I'm going to have to change you. You know what I mean? As in, you have to skip out. Why? Because this vision requires that someone would own it. Now, how do we also do that? Notice that Audrey and I have never called this our vision. It's not even our church. We are the pastors of this church. We steward this vision. But I've always said my vision would be selfish and I'd be in the Maldives with a super yacht and just Ords and the kids, and I'm cool with that. Like, I could do that. And then if I get to go to heaven as well, like, yes, amen, right? Like, let's do that. That's my vision. I would love that. My vision is not to freeze for 5 months of the year and have to build something where you're answering your very question, Nick. And so I think that really what I've learned is that, responsibility and ownership also comes from value. Like, somebody has to value what you're giving them. And we can't force value upon people. I can't make you value relationships like I value them.
Yeah.
I've recently gone through that. I can't make you value people the way that I want them valued. I can't make you value the pulpit like you want to, I want it valued.
Wow.
But what I can do is look for people that don't have our culture, but have our spirit. Like spirited people value the same things. Culture is taught, but it needs the guardrails or the foundation of spirit to stand on. When people don't have the right same spirit as you, they don't have the actual same values as you. My spirit is that I want to serve, let's say, and someone else's spirit is they want to be seen. Well, I'm going to build my life in such a way where I'm elevating others. They're going to build their life in such a way where they're being elevated. Those things are not in conjunction together. So if I think the number one thing that we constantly got to be doing, especially as the leader, Nick, is you've got to go, okay, I am the leader of this. I'm giving you something to steward. It is an opportunity. It is my responsibility to the vision and to the placement where God has put me to make sure that you value it as I value it. It's my job to give you space to have responsibility, and then responsibility will create ownership. And the next thing with ownership is that there must be demand. You must actually expect what you want to see and not just preach what you want to see. It's not what you preach, but what you permit that actually becomes your culture. So if you permit subpar, work ethic, you're going to get that as a culture.
Right.
But if you expect something different, people will always do one of two things. They will lift or they will sift.
Yes.
Which is a valuable lesson to every leader, and it speaks to the narcissistic quality within any human, and that is to be liked, celebrated, and followed. But we often base that off current church culture, not biblical culture, because Jesus was both followed often and unfollowed often.
That's right.
And we don't often celebrate Jesus the unfollowed, we only celebrate Jesus the followed. We don't speak about the leaders that are unfollowed, we just speak about the ones that are absolutely followed. But the reality is, church is not like a life raft as much as it's more like a train.
Wow.
And it is a train with people that have, and there is stops. And some people will go all the way to the final destination with us, and other people will go as far as they can go and get off at the next stop. If you think of it that way, you start to take it a little less personal. You start to look for people that value what you value. You release them to ownership. You expect more from them because you're being faithful to the vision over being faithful to the person. Because sometimes we kill many for the sake of loving one. I've made that mistake at times. And so there's things of that nature that we all got to navigate. And so I don't think it's just a byproduct of leadership. It's a byproduct of somebody with ownership.
Yeah, I would add, I think the only filter in a leadership situation, the only filter that you need to remove is your own, if you are the leader. And what I mean by that is that often we lead and we have all of these filters. We're not calling people to more. We're saying people's no for them. We don't want to push them because we don't want to hurt them or offend them. We're too invested in just some of the soft spaces, so there's not a lot of push. So it's filters. So I think you'll only lead and release people to the filters that you have as a leader. And you have to be very careful. And sometimes the way that we've been treated as following a leader, we often by default lead people in the completely contrary way. But it's too extreme in the other way. Like we had to learn that. We were under leaders we loved them, but they were freaking crazy. Like crazy leaders, you guys. We have stories, anyway. So when we first planted People Church, and Jimmy can vouch for that a little, or a lot.
More than us.
A lot, more than us. So when we planted People Church, we're not gonna be like them. We're gonna be completely this way. But that hurt us because some of the ways in which they operated as leaders and the requirements and the demands, they were necessary in order for life to function. But we're we don't need the help, we don't need this, we don't need that, so we're just gonna do it on our own, and we suffered for years. So you have to be careful how you lead people according to the filters that you put in place. So those have to be checked. You can't change their filters. They have to take responsibility for that, and that'll happen through the challenge without your own filters getting in the way.
It's a great question, Nick, because it is one of the biggest frustration points of a leader, and I would point you just to a biblical point as well that speaks to this whole thing of spirit. I can't give you the exact reference, but it's basically Moses takes 70 of the elders to the base of the mountain, and what happened that got them there is he's complaining to God. He's frustrated. He's like, man, I can't keep doing this. And God basically says, well, bring the core leadership to the base of the mountain, and what I will do is put a dose of the spirit that's on you on them. And when people started to share the same spirit, they value the same things. When you value the same things, you get excited about the same things. And therefore you are really engaged in the same things. So, that's kind of my message yesterday. I said, you got to find your people. And sometimes your people are your people for a season. And then after that, their next stop on the train is up, and as your value set keeps building, or as all of your value set is now coming into play and demanding of them, they've got to jump off, and that's okay, because there's more than one place to build kingdom and whatnot. But it's kind of maybe not the be all and end all answer, but that's my and Ordz's answer on that. Great question though, Nick. Comes from a good place if you're experiencing that. Well, guys, 11:59. I want to encourage you guys. Don't just take this stuff your way and then write a goal. Write a goal on the leader you want to be. And just remember this, that being a leader isn't that difficult when you consider it's about elevating people. It's about challenging the things in them that are holding them up and knowing that you'll never lead what you're too afraid to lose. If you can do those three things, you'll usually lead really well because you're always going to be empowering and lifting people up, which is a great basis to start any conversation with. And then secondly, you're going to be obviously challenging the things that are in the way of the places they want to go. And the only way you're going to challenge those things is if you're never too afraid to lose them in case they don't like what you're challenging. But if you do it well, at the end of the day, you'll always be able to lead someone that you're not afraid to lose. And I think they're three mantras that have served me well, and I think they'll serve you well. They'll be freeing, and it takes the pressure off leadership being that you have to be brilliant, you have to be the best or the smartest. You don't. The goal of a good leader would be that the best, the largest, and the smartest are under your leadership and still call you leader.